Hi, welcome to the second tutorial of using Text Fabric in the ETCBC. During this tutorial, I'm going to help you set up an environment on your system so that you can use Text Fabric and begin to query the ETCBC database. We're going to work through 7 steps. So let's get started. I've cleared my system, so I'm going to be starting from a blank slate, just like you. So first, let's just find Anaconda. Usually the first result will be this www.continuum.io, and we can find the download portion. Now, I will say that I'm working from a Mac system, and this will be quite different from a Windows system. So for some of these things, you're going to need to look up some more information until perhaps I make a Windows version of this video. Select Python 3.5, so download for OS X, and we're going to do the graphic installer. All right, while this is downloading, it may take a little bit. I want to introduce the command line, which is the second part of this tutorial. So in a Mac, you can access the command line by simply opening up your Spotlight search and typing in terminal. You should see this little box here that'll pop up, and if you press enter, it'll pull up your terminal. Now, if you're like my system, this is how your terminal looks when it first opens up. If you want to, you can do all sorts of different things under preferences. You can change the background color. You can also change the size of the text. I like to do this personally. So this is the command line, not to be feared. And on the command line, it's basically a way to interact with your system. So you're essentially doing many of the things you would be doing with any other computer, except you're actually typing it out. Something that you may not know about the command line, actually. We're still waiting for the Anaconda to finish downloading. In a Mac computer, you actually have Python already installed on your system. So if we type Python within the command line and press enter, it will actually boot up a Python interpreter. And you notice here it says that we're running Python 2.7. And I actually don't want to do that, so we're going to do Python 3. So your system should have that already on there. Again, as we're waiting for this to finish downloading, I'm going to give you a few basic ideas about how you can use Python. It allows us to do things like assign variables. So we can say A equals, in this case, 1. Okay, now A equals 1. And we can say B equals 2. And we can actually say A plus B, and it will return to us 3. So this is very basic Python programming. It could work with anything. So if we said pizza equals 2 and cheese equals 5, then pizza plus cheese will return to us 7. Also in Python, you have things called containers. A container is a certain type of object in the Python programming language. There's all kinds of containers. But the most simple one that I would like to introduce to you at this point is the list. Let me give you an example. We said in this case, we are going to create a variable called a shopping list equals, and then we're going to create the container, the list. The list begins with an open bracket, and we're going to put some items in the list. Any item that we put inside of this list can either be a digit, or an integer, or a string, in other words, a word, in which case we need to put quotes around it, double or single quotes. In this case, I'll use single quotes. What we do is we enclose the string, and we add some more elements, separated by commas. So we want some pizza, we want some cheese, and we want some dog food. All right, so now we have a shopping list. It's been defined in a variable shopping list. We've assigned it with the equal, and we put it in an actual list, which is literally list of things separated by commas, enclosed within these square brackets. Now here's where the magic of programming really comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to visit each item in this list. We're going to loop over this list. We're going to print each item. So I'm going to say for item in shopping list, then we're going to put a colon. I'm going to say for item in shopping list, print, open parentheses, that item, close parentheses. Now when I press enter, what it's actually going to do is it's going to say, okay, for every item in shopping list. So it'll hit each item in a loop. And as it hits those items, it will perform whatever command we've given it underneath this indentation, so underneath this colon. If I press enter, it's going to actually do what we've asked it to do. So in this case, print pizza, cheese, and dog food. Okay, so now our Anaconda file has downloaded. Open the package, and it's going to start the installation process. So we're going to go through the process. Okay, so just to remind you where we're at so far, we've downloaded Anaconda. While we've waited for that to download, we've gone ahead and talked a little bit about Python basics. And we've looked at the command line. Now, in the command line, as we're waiting for this next process to finish, let's take a look here. We're still running the Python interpreter. We actually want to exit and leave the Python interpreter. So we're going to do this command here called quit. like this. You'll notice this command is actually very similar in form to this one, and it will return us back to the command line like so. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to Python. Now I want to, as this is getting ready to finish, I want to show you one more thing before we move on. In the command line, you're actually interacting with the file system on your computer. In the Finder, you're simply interacting with the files with a graphic interface. So on the command line, you're basically doing the same thing, except you're doing it in a text environment. I can find out which folder am I sitting in on the command line. Or in other words, which directory. And in programming lingo, a directory simply means the folder that you're in. One simple thing that you can do to do that is pwd, print working directory. And that's actually going to return to you whatever directory, whatever folder that you're actually sitting in. And we haven't changed our directory location. So it should simply say something very similar for you. This is called your home directory. Okay, so we're gonna move ahead. Now that this is finished, and if you open up your apps, you should see a Anaconda Navigator, and you can actually open this up. It's going to open for you the Anaconda Navigator. I would suggest to you to not use the Navigator most of the time, but this is a very beginner-friendly version. Now this is the Jupyter Notebook viewer that we're going to talk about in the last portion of this tutorial. I don't want to get into this yet, but I just wanted to show you that's how it will open. So for now, I'm going to hit Control-C. This will interrupt the process, and I'm going to press yes, and it will shut down the process. And you can just X that out on your browser. Okay, and close the Anaconda Navigator. We're not going to need that for now. Okay, so far we've downloaded Anaconda and installed it, talked about the Python basics, looked at the command line, and now we're going to install the Text Fabric program. Here's how we're going to do that. We're going to open our terminal again, type pip install text fabric. Okay, you may be wondering, okay, where does this PIP come from? Anaconda takes care of a lot of these things. Puts a lot of the packages on your computer system. A word of caution here, you may get an error if you run this particular line of code. If that happens to you and it says something about permissions, then you may want to write sudo, and it's going to ask you for your computer password. Just enter that in, and it will do everything that it's supposed to do. If you have any problems with PIP install, even with the sudo, it might be useful to try PIP3 install text fabric like this and do the exact same thing, and it should run with no problems. If not, go ahead and say something in the Slack group, and then maybe we can help you out. So let's see if this works. Okay, so it starts to collect it, download it, install it, and now we're successfully installed Text Fabric 1.2.7. And yours will probably be different because by the time you see this, it will be an updated version of Text Fabric. All right, so we've done that. We've installed the program. Now we have to get the data. Now, the data needs to go somewhere specific on your machine so that the program knows how to find it. When you open up the terminal, you should already be in your home directory. And you can make sure that you are by doing pwd, and that will tell you which directory you're in. And if you're really not sure, if you do cd change directory, it will automatically route you to your home directory if you happen to not be in there already. If we type in ls, it will actually give us all of the folders or directories and files inside of the directory that we're currently in. You're going to want to put the Text Fabric data either in your home directory or in a folder within your home directory labeled GitHub, because this is where Text Fabric is going to search for the data that it needs. And if you don't have GitHub already, you do mkdir make directory, and then type the name of the new directory or folder, GitHub, and you'll see that a new GitHub folder appears. Okay, so this is why we discussed this, because now we need to get the data. We're going to actually do that from the command line. First, let's open up the GitHub page. So we're going to go to github.com, and in the search bar, go ahead and type in ETCBC, and you'll see some of these results here. Just press 1, and then go back here to the ETCBC, and then you can find the Text Fabric. Now we need the data, so we click on data. And what you're going to do is you're going to grab this link, copy it, come back over here, and now we need to navigate to the GitHub directory. So again, print working directory, we're in users, we're in Cody, my home directory. If we do cd, change directory, GitHub, it will actually move us into that folder. So if we do pwd again, now we see users, Cody, and now we're sitting in GitHub. Here's how we're going to get the data. We're going to type git clone paste the URL and press enter. And the magic will start to happen here, and it will download all of the data. And as it's doing that, you can actually look and go into that GitHub folder that you created, and you'll actually see the new folder where the data is going to be dumped into. Let's go ahead and navigate over to the TextFabric program information in GitHub. And if you come to this page, you can click on the wiki, and this is going to give you the information for the TextFabric program. And it's what we call the API. The API is basically essentially a map to be able to understand how to use TextFabric in Python. It assumes, however, that you already know Python, as you'll see from these dialog boxes. Don't worry about that. I'll talk you through each step of the way. But also, if you need instructions, again, on everything that we just did, then you can find that here. Okay, so now we have the data. It's here. We can click in it. Here's the Hebrew, and here's the ETCBC 4C with the actual data, which is contained inside of these TF files. The beautiful thing about TextFabric is that the data storage is extremely simple. If I come to one of these files, these are all files containing features on object. In this case, this is the lexeme and the UTF-8. And if I do open with TextEdit, it will show you that this is just a simple text file that contains the data. We talked about the API, where to find it. Now I want to show you the features and objects in the database. There's a couple places that you can go. The old way of looking at this, which still provides a nice format, is if you go to Shebang and you click on the feature doc, you can see all the features and you can organize them by name, by code. So in this case, you have word features. Here's all the features for word, morphology, statistics, laws features. These are the features that you're able to use and query inside the database. You can also find those features back to the website here, go into TextFabric, this other folder, this notebook here, and this is probably going to be more updated. Okay guys, so we now have a working environment installed on our system. Remember, in our command line, we're still sitting in the GitHub folder, and I want to open in my home directory what I'm about to do. So we just do CD, enter, and that will bring us back, printing the work directory. You can see that will bring us back to where we were. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type Jupyter Notebook. So if we hit enter, it's going to start this little green tabs, and in your web browser will open the Jupyter Notebook. Now, what is the Jupyter Notebook? It's important to understand there's nothing actually interfacing with the web right now. And you can actually tell by looking up here, it says localhost. So it's actually running this interface from your system. So whether or not you're connected to the internet, it does not matter at all. What this interface does is it allows you to run Jupyter notebooks, also called iPython notebooks. So if we open up here, we hit new, and we hit Python conda root notebooks. It's going to start a new notebook, and it started it in whatever folder we were in. So this here is just a simple folder navigator of your machine. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to desktop and do a new one again. Okay, so let's give it a name, tutorial. For now, I just want to navigate over here. Don't close this because this is still running the notebook in your system. So just minimize it for now. And you'll see on the desktop, actually, the notebook has appeared. So notebooks are just files that tells the browser what it needs to do. These files save whatever you're working on, and they're transferable. So you can send somebody your notebooks, you can post them on the web. If your system gives you any issues with opening this, then you can do open text edit. And if even that doesn't work, then if you go to get info and you can do open with, and you can tell it to change all so that it will always open an iPython notebook file with text edit. So you can actually look inside of that file, see what it is. Okay guys, so we're now running an iPython notebook in Jupyter. And just like on the command line in terminal, we were running Python code. Each one of these little cells, and we can add more like this, is running Python or can run Python. The way that we do this, let's take a variable. Let's call this one monkey and set it equal to 10. And let's call this one banana and set it equal to 5. And let's do monkey plus banana. All right, and there's two ways that you can run this. You can either click up here, run cell, and it will say monkey plus banana is 15. Or my favorite, this is a tropical monkey. And now let's change this to coconuts. The other way that you can run the cell is by holding shift and pressing enter, and it will re-execute the cell. Okay, how do we actually get up and running with TextFabric? So at this point, we have installed Anaconda, looked at some basics of Python, looked at the command line, looked at Text Fabric and installed Text Fabric on the system as a program, downloaded the Text Fabric data for the ETCBC, looked at the Text Fabric API map. I've introduced you to it at least so that you can be familiar. We've looked at the features and objects and how to access those, and I've showed you Jupyter Notebooks and how those work. One other thing about the Jupyter Notebooks that's important, they are saving. So and you can do a sort of a forced save if you do a Command S, and it will tell you right here, checkpoint created. And the neat little thing is if you actually go back to here and open it up, you'll notice inside of this file, it contains the information that we have put in the cell. So monkey and coconuts, that's all there. It's contained within this data container, which is basically like a JSON format. Just know that you can see that the results are changing, and it's even printing the results. So here is 12, here's 12. So if we were to, say, transfer this file to a different computer that was capable of running iPython notebooks, this file would run and display just exactly like this. All right, so one last thing before I finish this tutorial video, I want to show you how to actually get started, at least on a basic level, with accessing the Text Fabric data and getting into this. In Python, you can do this thing like import modules. You can think of it as a video game console, and you're placing a video game inside the console to run that game, or you're loading a program. And you can do this same thing in Python. Of course, I'm simplifying it, but for the sake of this tutorial, this is the best way to explain it. So one way to import is you're going to type from tf.fabric. And this is going to actually access the Fabric program. From that program, we want to import a module called Fabric. And you can do hold Shift Enter to run this cell, and it should do nothing, which is actually a good sign in this case. Okay, and now we're going to create a variable. I'm going to call it tf, but you could also call it monkey, you could call it anything, but you're going to create a variable, tf equals, and you're going to call Fabric, which you'll recognize we've imported or we've brought into the code with this little line. We're going to open this. You'll also recognize this notation. If I start a new cell, remember that we did the print function here on the command line. If you remember, we did that. We also called the quit function on the command line. And you don't need to remember that at this point, but mainly I just want you to recognize that we're actually, in this case, just calling a function again in some sense. It's a little more complicated than that, but this is one way for you to get your mind around what's happening here. Okay, so we're going to do Fabric. We're going to say modules equals Hebrew ETCBC for C. If we run this code, we should see some magic happening. The code is going to go into our GitHub folder that we've already created, that we've put the Text Fabric data inside. It's going to pull it out, and it should say that it's found the features. And so the program is started. It's running. We're doing good things now. Now we need to load the features. Essentially, we've loaded no features at this point. We've only found the features. We've only instantiated or created the program. Let's do API. This is another variable, so it could really be anything, equals, and we're going to call this variable, which we've assigned to this function, tf.load. Load means that we're going to load some features. And again, this is a function, so we're going to use parentheses just like we've been doing. You're going to need to put these quotes. If you remember, the quotation defines this as a string, meaning it can contain numbers, but the idea is that it's a string type, not an integer type. So that's a little above what we're working on right now. But right now, if you just copy what I'm doing here, you should not go wrong. Okay, so now we need some features to load. So where are we going to get our features? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because now we can tutorials, go back here, go to our database features. We can pick some features to load. So in this case, let's decide to load O-type, which is object type. You basically always need to load O-type. So that you can know what objects you're working with, object type. If you click on it, it will give you an explanation of what an O-type is. And we can come back in here and let's just do this. Let's do O type. We're going to load one feature. Let's load two. So if you want to load a second one, you'll just put a space. And let's also load the book feature. All right, and I'm going to execute this code with a shift enter. And the first time that you run this, the program is going to work through all of the features and assemble everything that needs to be assembled. If I'm correct, I think it doesn't do that every single time. It only does it for sort of the first times that you load this stuff. So you'll see these things sort of going. If you see an asterisk in the notebook in a cell that's being run, that means that there's a process that's ongoing. And you just have to wait for that process to complete before you can move on to the next cell. Okay, so the loader has finished loading all of the features. You should have a pretty long little readout here, and it will give you a final prompt, all features loaded / computed. And if you want more details, you can call this function. But for now, we're going to go with this as is. I want to do one more thing. I'm going to do this for your own sake. If you do API make available in, just type it exactly like this, globals, and put in this new function. Sorry, make sure that this is a lowercase m, and this is going to make your life easier. You can learn about why later on, but for now, just go ahead and use this notation. Okay, so we've come all this way. I wanted to give you one last thing to sort of finish off this video by actually looking at data inside of the ETCBC database. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a container object. If you remember earlier in this tutorial, we created a list in Python and we stored grocery items in our list. And right now we're just going to say do an object list like this. It's a variable. We're going to assign it to an empty list. So we're not going to manually put anything into this list. Instead, we want the code to dump things into the list for us. And we're going to loop over objects in the ETCBC database. If you remember also previously in this tutorial, we looped over the objects in the list, shopping list, and we printed every single one of those objects. Well, in the same way, we can also loop over the objects in the ETCBC database. And here's how we're going to do that. So we're going to loop over every object in the ETCBC database. So we're going to say for object, if anything ever turns green like this while you're typing, defining a variable, this is okay, but if you're defining a variable, try not to use it. You can use something like this, an abbreviation for object. N. And just like we looped over the list, we now need to loop over the objects in the database. Well, how do we do that? There's lots of ways to do that, but I'm going to show you one of the simplest ways to access the objects that you need to access in the ETCBC database through text fabric. So you'll say for object in f dot o type. So this is the object type feature that we loaded here previously. So for object type, and we're going to do .s, which is going to iterate through the object types in the ETCBC database. Again, this is a function, so we're going to open it like this, and we need to give it an argument in the function. We need to tell it what type of objects we want to count. And in this case, we want to count clause objects. So we're going to type in clause, and it's going to iterate through all the clause objects. We finish the loop like this, and remember, we have to tell the loop what to do. So the way that Python works is indentation is important. So underneath this for loop, we're going to indent, and we're going to tell it what to do. In this tape, we're going to say object list dot and append another function. And if you haven't noticed already, functions can be called on certain types of objects or on certain types of variables. And we'll get to that later. But for now, we're going to append object. So for object in, and this is going to iterate through every single clause object in the ETCBC database. And here's what we're telling it to do. Take object list to append to the object list the object that we're looping in. Okay, let's do that. Okay, it finished pretty quickly, and now we need to see what actually happened. So First, I want to show you a very simple function. It's called length, like this, len, and we'll put object list inside, and this will return to us the length of the object list. So we see here that we have 88,000 clauses. Pretty interesting. If we want to access one of those objects, one of those clauses, we can say object list, and this may be a little bit confusing because here we have square brackets that are empty that simply stand for an empty list. But when you put square brackets next to the variable name for the list itself without this assignment feature, it actually is telling the Python code to access that list. And you access lists by index numbers. Okay, so this is a little bit complicated for this tutorial, but if you index it at 0, basically every item in a list is numbered from 0 all the way till the end. So the counting starts with 0. So it's basically like its mailbox address. And you can pull that item by addressing it or by calling its address at whatever number it's in that list. In this case, we're just going to call the first element. Remember, the count starts at 0. And we're going to run this, and we'll see just this random number pop up. And this is an actual clause object in the ETCBC, but this number stands for a node. And this node you can call all kinds of features on. We'll get more into that later, but for now I hope that you've been satisfied. You're able to load the data into TextFabric, even make some very simple queries. So for now, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.